But yeah, and I was talking to a bunch of people about this. Like I was kind of giving them an introduction to the tech industry and how you understand the tech industry. How does our tech industry operates? And integrity seems to be a fundamental part of this. Like you need to have integrity as a software engineer, meaning that integrity basically doing the right thing even if no one is looking. So if I don't know about technology and someone is hiring me to build software for them, I shouldn't take advantage of them and say like, well, they're never going to look after me. They're never going to ask, why didn't you write unit test or anything like that, right? So let me make it quick and charge just about the same amount. There's no integrity there, right? And that's how, my friend, you end up with software that fails all the time, whether it's I mean, the Chernobyl disaster. Do you know what was the reason for the Chernobyl disaster? Right? People didn't test. They didn't do their jobs, right? If you look at, and I think there's just a big example that I show people, like it can be extremely dangerous, but check this out. Why did the Chernobyl disaster happen? Look, was the result of a flawed reactor design. Look, no peer review, no testing, that was operated with inadequately trained personnel. In other words, people just didn't do their jobs, really. Right? The resulting steam explosion and fires released at least 5% of the radioactive reactor core into the environment. Just a complete disaster, right? It becomes even more dangerous when you start realizing, oh, I am building libraries and I'm building tools. You don't know where these libraries are going to be used. Like this RESTful Sense library has 100,000 downloads on it. I have absolutely no idea who's using it, where they're using it, what kind of business are using it. So I have to build it in a way that's extremely, extremely proper. So when people actually build on top of it, it's actually solid. It's in a good shape. Hey, Mustafa, nice to meet you. Okay. Okay. Omar says we should build as if the software is going into a Boeing 747. Yeah, if it's critical, mission critical, whatever the case may be, right? I've also seen like a lot of software engineers would say things like, we'll let's just do it this way and then we'll go back later and fix it. You hear that a lot. Be like, oh, let's just cut this corner here and then we'll go back later and fix it, right? There's no going back. Nobody ever goes back and does things right. You move on to new features, new capabilities, and the software, like just chaotic software keeps piling up on top of each other, right? And then you reach to the point where it's, full bar, beyond maintain, beyond maintainability.
But the reasoning behind it, I wouldn't say like it's just someone did like engineers are not doing their work. It's mostly pushed with the tight deadlines and
They
some.
shouldn't compromise. This is what I tell engineers: don't compromise. Say, I don't know what you want me to do. Like, it's like, let me ask you this, Milan. And this is how I was explaining it to someone once. They said, "Oh, we have a deadline." I said, "Okay, who determined this deadline? The engineers or the business?" They'll come and say, "Well, it's the business." I said, "Okay, did the business consult the engineers? Did the business consult the engineers? If the answer is no, then that's the business fault, right? Imagine this. Let me ask you this, Milan. Let's say I come to you today and I say you have 3 hours to make me a car from scratch. Is this possible? It's not possible. You don't have the tools, you don't have the men, you don't have the knowledge. You don't have none of that, right? It's like going to a chef and saying, "Hey, make me steak from scratch in 2 seconds." Some things are just nonsensical, right? Go
But
ahead.
you know what's funny about it? Because usually people that decide to say yes or no, the ones that from the technical perspective are not the ones that will be on the project. They have technical
Yeah,
expertise, but and they
yeah,
say yes, they can do it, but they're not the ones
yep,
that are on the field mostly.
yep. If you don't consult the people that will actually write the code, you will always set yourself up for disappointment. And a this is not a thing that happens onesies and twosies. This happens across the industry. Across the industry. Go at any. I talked once to this business person, and they said, "Oh, we have to put these crazy deadlines because engineers are lazy. They're not going to do their job." So I said to them, "Well, if the tasks are clear and the estimates on these tasks are clear, then you can have a better visibility on how long something would actually take. I mean, I don't know if you know this, Milan, but we built an entire system called Get File that will basically tell you your average timing in delivering a feature. It's massive. Like if engineering teams knew about the system, it's huge. It can help them a lot, kind of develop a lot of features. But anyway, the bottom line is, and this is one of the reasons why we create these podcasts, we create these communities, we create these open source projects, is that a lot of engineers just started to think there's no such a thing as properly standardized software. There's no such a thing. Everyone is just doing their own thing. So we needed a cohesive framework, something that tells engineers, here's a school of thought. Here is how we start and we end things, right? And people pick and choose, but the worst thing in the world is an engineer that goes and cuts corners and then now they're stuck maintaining that and they don't have the time. Do you know what some engineers do just to get themselves out of that? They either quit their jobs, continue to add bugs into an existing system and get yelled at, or they go work extra time at night that they don't get paid for to clean things up, which is even worse. Like, imagine this is someone that's giving away time from their life to maintain a system because their business counterparts, they don't know how to respect, the ideas. So ideally, it comes down to strong engineering leadership. Hey, Gregory, strong engineering leadership that goes in and says, okay, as a stakeholder, as someone who has a say, I should not allow business to set up deadlines without consulting the engineers. And this is the biggest mistake a lot of people make today. A lot of engineers. You know what scares me the most? When engineers say, well, that's going to take a week, but business says get it done in 3 days. What can we do? When engineers do that, I'd be like, what can we do? You know what happened? It still takes a week because you can't just, it's physics, right? It still takes a week and then the engineers get yelled at. That breaks my heart, because let me tell you this, and this is only in the tech industry, by the way. Imagine, hey Vladimir and Nick, yep. So imagine if you tell a plumber to come fix something at your home,
Mhm.
and then you tell that plumber you have only 20 minutes. Do you know what they're gonna do? They're gonna throw the tools in your face and they're gonna leave. Try to give a plumber a deadline, see what they do, or a mechanic, right? Try to go to a doctor and tell the doctor, hey, doctor, I have a sore throat. I need help, but you have only 3 minutes to get it done. Right, Kailu? Is that right? Try to do that with the person that's doing your taxes. Try to do that with it, like anywhere, right? Except the tech industry. People would come in. Do you know even the people that build buildings, like, workers that kind of will build buildings and stuff like that? If you go to them and say, I want this whole house done in a week, they all quit their jobs. Be like, have fun. Go do it by yourself.
But in the building industry, I think it's similar. To be honest, I see they also have these tight deadlines and they work over the weekend, even though they didn't
But they
sign
get paid.
for.
They get paid. Full-time engineers, they don't get paid for it. It'd be like
Yeah.
work extra hours and you're not going to get paid for it, right? Um, what else? What other industry? Try to tell a nurse to finish up taking your blood sample in like a minute. She gonna poke you 20 times just out of spite, just to teach you not to talk until you can never say that to anybody except software engineers. You just go to software engineers, right? And you tell them, hey, I don't know anything about technology, but I need this feature done in a week. And somehow engineers take it. Engineers take that crap from people, and uh, they actually let someone walk over them like that. That's really sad. Anyway, that's not the topic of this project, but we just kind of ventured off. We're starting the conversation, and you know, uh, it came up, so I thought I have to share some of that stuff. I have my own podcast, by the way, for people that don't know. I have an actual podcast on Spotify where I talk to myself and vent off all of these things that I learned about the tech industry. So, okay, let's get to business. So, Milan, you were building. I saw you and Omar. You were building the database part. How
Getting
did that?
wild on the PR.
How did that go? Let's see here.
um, yeah, let's take a look.
Here we go. Okay, so entity intelligence, and then you have this PR. This is our retrieve tables with properties, and then I'm gonna go inside this one, and let's just discuss it. Let's just talk about it together and see how far we can take the thing, right? So here we go, and I'm just gonna zoom out a little. Here we go. Gregory, please tell us if you if it's not visible to people or if the text is too small. I'll give it just one notch like this. Here you go. So okay, so let's see what you have here. So this is the query, right?
Yeah.
That's so this is the query, and then you're basically passing this query to query async. So the entity framework, no,
No,
you,
this is
you ended up
Dapper.
using
Dapper.
you
Yeah.
ended up using Dapper. That's what I thought. I know that Callum from the standard community said you can do it in entity framework. So Callum, if you're watching this, give us a POC or
I mean,
you
yeah,
know.
it's in a preview, Ken, but I just went with this proved
Oh, the
one.
preview, the
Yeah.
preview version. Okay,
Yeah.
so it's not stable yet. Okay, cool. Now here comes the interesting part, though. Some may say that this part all the way down here is technically business logic because your broker is supposed to be executing inputs, not creating them. What is a business logic? Let me just go back here 1 second and let me just tell you what is a business logic, and then you'll be able to point out immediately whether what we have here is business logic or not. So business logic is anything that is sequential, intentionally sequential, or there is selection, or there is iteration. Anything that falls under one of these three is business logic. What does that mean? In here, if you go and say var student equal new student, and then you sequence and you say db add student like that, that's sequential. You're creating business logic. These steps dependent on each other. That's business logic, right? If you go and say selection, anything that does selection, by the way, any programming language that doesn't have these three things is not a programming language. You have to have selection, iteration, and sequencing. So anything like an if statement, if student is null, that's business logic. Or when you go and say switch case, that's business logic. Or anything that makes a decision in general, right? Anything that is going to basically determine one direction or another, that's what we call business logic. The last thing is your for loop, for each. There's ones that are even between iteration and selection. Can you think of one that has a mixture of iteration and selection? Do while. Do you
While
remember
while
do
do and
while
do I.
and while, right? And while do, something like that. Nobody uses while do while anymore. It's all fluent. So if you have anything that falls under these three, that's business logic. So what are
Mhm.
brokers supposed to do really? Well,
But
brokers are
mhm.
go ahead. Go ahead.
What if you have DB? So you have up there this DB dot add. What if you have you're accessing DB context and then you're saying uh, like students and then dot where something. So there is
That's
some
business
business logic
logic
there.
because
Uh
that's
huh.
selection. You're basically saying where student equals Milan. So it's exactly the same as saying for each student, if name equals Milan, return.
But okay, let's say we have a broker that needs to return students that are I don't know from some school, and then you pass school name to the broker, right?
Hmm.
And then in the broker you go to the DB context dot students where school name equals something. That's how usually it's being usually done, right? And that's
You wouldn't pass the school name to the broker. You would basically get a deferred execution thing
Mm-hmm.
from the broker, and then at the business logic layer, you go and say students dot where, like that.
Mm-hmm.
Know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So anything that falls under that is considered business logic. If you see a component, let it be a controller. So let me ask you this: does try catch fall under any of these three?
Yeah, because it tries to do something, and then if something happens in catch, it does something with it. So
See, you just
it's
said F, right? So it's a selection.
yeah.
That's why we don't handle exceptions in brokers. So anything that makes a decision, basically, it has to be pushed either to the services side, it has to be pushed somewhere, right? And the argument in the standard community still stands on the exposure layers for controllers because we take the exception and we
Mm-hmm.
turn it into a we go and catch the exception and we return something else. There is a way around it, but this is an R&D. Just so you understand, the standard community has an R&D piece. Really smart people think about upgrading the standard, and there are people that are using the standard, and then there are people that are teaching the standard. See, these three things, that's what the standard community is. People that take advantage of it and go build things with it, people that teach people how to build things with it, and then there are people that are actively evolving the standard. They're thinking about, how to kind of change how we develop things. That's what makes this community quite strong in this matter. So the reason why I'm saying this is because I'm looking in here and I'm seeing a problem. I'm seeing sequencing, right? This is sequencing. And Omar, I saw his comment. It's almost like also selection, right? It's almost like selection. But Brooks says business logic, business rules governing data processing and application behavior. Right. That's another way to basically explain it. This is like the fancier way to say it. I'm not that smart. I can say it this way. But I can tell you, hey, if it goes like this, or it goes like this, or it goes like this, then that's business logic. That's as far as I can take it. So So this here is what, and this is just us kind of learning together, Milan, because I am hoping
Mm-hmm.
to God, like when I'm just kind of talking to people about these things, there's always this one person that will ask a question that I don't know an answer to, and that's how I'm learning, right? So this is my way of going and saying, hey, Milan, look at this stuff that we're doing. What do you think? Some people just reject it and walk away and be like, I'm not going to follow the standard. I don't care, right? Some people will give me some ideas. If I like the ideas, it gets incorporated into the standard. If it doesn't match certain rules and principles, be like, well, we agree to disagree.
You know what
But
I'm
this,
not getting here? Like,
mm,
okay, let's say we are passing a query, but then you are putting external behavior or external parts of the system in foundation, right? They need to think about the SQL and about the query, right?
yeah,
And
and your
should
mhm.
Mhm.
And your foundation services are not pure. Like, let me show you. We did say you will see a situation where I'll show you the standard. So I'll show you. If you look at we're almost at 1,000 stars, by the way. That's fantastic. I love that. And Gregory, by the way, I forgot to make this announcement. Gregory started adding versions for the standard. I used to just put dates, just Hijri dates in there, and he was like, okay, that's way too long. We need to come up with a better way to kind of express this. So we are technically at V2.9. The breaking changes in the standard will pump up the major version, so it'll go up to 3. And we have a couple of these pending. But let me just go to your question, Milan. On the services side, there's a nice thing in here that basically says, here's your foundation services. And I put it at the very, very bottom here. Yeah, watch this. The red is external. It's not things that you own. The red,
Mhm.
okay? And the green is the business logic that you own. Look at the foundation services. They're mappers. They take models and exceptions from the brokers and they map them into local models. Your real business logic starts from the exposure layer of the foundation service onwards until you reach to the controller or whatever exposure layer in your system. Like it could be a library, API, whatever the case may be.
Mhm.
Like
Well,
your
I mean,
process.
why I
Go
made
ahead.
these questions, as you can see, mapping native external models to the local models. So it mostly deals with what comes out of the broker service. So that's why I didn't get
Yep,
it. Like what we also put there, what we also send to the broker can also be foreign.
yep. It can, and you can't control it. Like let's say, for instance, you're working with SynGrid. Do you know SynGrid? Have you heard that name before? SynGrid.
Mm,
SynGrid is this library,
no.
right? This library here, SynGrid C#. SynGrid will basically go and tell you, here is my models, and I'm dictating these models. So you will see things like mail, response, all of that fun stuff, right? Let's say you want to put SynGrid. Do you see this email address? What do you think about this model? That's external. It's an external model, right? How do you encapsulate that in a broker without doing business logic in the broker? You can't, right? You have to pass that model to your broker from your foundation service. So it would look something like this. You would basically go and say, this broker, this dot email broker dot send email async external email model, whatever. I'm calling it this way so you know that this is
Mhm.
that. So your foundation service is calling this guy, right? But watch this. Your foundation service contract itself, let me simplify things, so just freak people out. It's actually, you can say here, send email async, and that's your local email model. See how your foundation service is wrapping that part up. Like a lot of people mistakenly think that the brokers are the last point of abstraction. Not true, especially on the way in, right? On the
Mhm.
way in, it's not true. But watch this. What will your, like if I go here and say email, send email, or process emails at the processing service level, all your work is working with your local email model because you're working with services and abstractions, right? Email service that can only understand local model. That's when your abstraction actually happens. Let me tell you why this problem is extremely hard. Models change all the time. Like the model that you're working with can be anything, right? Like what if SendGrid itself is saying, no, I actually want fields. So you're gonna go here and say Milan at email.com and I want your first name and Toncic, like that, right? This here, if you let that leak up to the top here in your foundation service, then some external library is controlling your internal core business logic. They're influencing how your system works. Then you didn't really achieve abstraction. Even though it looks like you have local models, you didn't really achieve, like the standard will say, okay, yeah, you can have primitives, string X and string Y. Yeah, primitives are allowed. Right? If someone is not familiar with the standard, we'll go and say, I don't see any violations in here because I'm not using my external models. But the reality is that this guy here influenced your foundation service, and it's going to influence upstream all the way up to your processing, orchestration, coordination services, and so on and so forth. So just because you're not using external or native models, it doesn't mean that you actually achieved full abstractions. It has to be conceptual. Like you are dictating how the API looks like with no influence from anywhere or anything else. It's a hard problem. It's not an easy problem to solve. Like I've seen some systems that will really bend your thoughts, just break your brain. You know, some systems will basically dictate some, like I'll give you an example. I've seen some systems where they go and do this. There is a thing in the world called Magic JSON. Have you heard of that nonsense? Magic JSON? Let me
No.
show you. Let me show you. Let me let me show you what Magic JSON is. Oh, you guys gonna love this one. So here's Magic JSON. Here's this. This is Magic JSON, right? And oh no, not this one. That's just Magic Johnson. Hold on. I think it's in C sharp. Yeah. So yeah, I need to find you the example, but I've seen some projects where people, you probably would relate to this. Have you ever seen an API where you're posting to Git?
Yeah. So many times.
Yeah. So you're posting data so you can get data. What's the problem with that? They're dictating the verbs in your system. Like they're dictating whether your broker can say get or post. Right? What do you do about that? I think brokers have the full authority to override the verbs of the underlying dependencies. So even though you're doing a post underneath, you can have the broker say retrieve because you are actually retrieving. But that's just one layer of abstraction. You still have to go upstream and deal with that craziness, right? You still have to deal with the fact that you're posting a body to get some data. Okay? But then from there onwards, you conceptually completely eliminated the issue with the language. So again, the influence can happen and you don't even know, like you know how you hang out with a bunch of bad friends, they start teaching you things and you start speaking like them. Usually they say, show me your friends, I'll show you who you are. Like I don't need to meet you, just show me your friends and I'll tell you exactly who you are. Systems are like that. Who are the systems that you're allowing into your core business logic, allowing into your life, and how much influence do they have on the thought process? It's wild. Software is just wild in that way, right? I can tell you an engineer have a strong personality or not literally by just looking at their code. Like, do they let an external resource tell them how to write their code, or do they have a really strong will that they will really enforce the rules? Are they the kind of people that will go the extra mile, put the extra hour to make sure systems are maintainable or not? Okay. Anyway, this is just a very long way of saying my suggestion, my idea is that I think, and Omar and Kailu, feel free, and people in watching, feel free to kind of share your thoughts. I think this guy shouldn't be in a broker method. Just my thoughts. But I'm also open for suggestions. I also think, Omar, that, Milan, I don't think the configurations should live here. Really. I think that this guy could be instantiated externally somewhere over here. Right? Because this guy can be used in multiple places and all that good stuff. Someone might argue, because we're doing a unit of work, we want to allow this scoped instantiation, and I'll be okay with that as long as you're creating a generic method and then you're using that generic method for the particular business case. I don't know. That's my spiel. Omar, Kailu, thoughts?
This
Milan?
is
Yeah.
actually, you can think about it as to like it has some business logic in it, in the select and all that, and it has some joinings and stuff. Like remember how we in the
Yep.
brokers we do pool related entities, right? The bottom
We
part
did
is
it. We do
basically that.
includes. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's basically going to see it that way.
You just said that in brokers we do includes, right?
Yeah.
We
You're
include
basic
all. Uh-huh.
includes is basically you're going and saying, give me the students and all the attached universities or schools to them. You didn't really do a selection or anything. You're just pulling larger chunks of data. That's all. Which I think is okay. But someone like a standard purist will say, no, build a different service and go search and query. So they might run into optimization problem. So either way for me is fine. I'm okay with either way.
I mean, from what we have talked so far, passing a
Mm,
query makes sense. Then we would need to think about the contract, whether that makes sense.
right. I personally suggest, like, if you turn this into run query async and you just allow to pass a parameter in here as a query, you're done. Just an
But
idea because go ahead.
having in mind that also the other broker that we will put there, the other broker method is also going to execute a query, right? The one that we get from the AI.
Yep.
So it's also gonna accept the query and also gonna execute it. So we would have two methods which basically do the same thing, execute the query on the.
Yeah, I wonder if the foundation service should be the one saying retrieve all tables and run query. So you have two methods at the foundation service layer, but they're basically running the same broker method underneath. You know what I mean? Like if you have both are saying run query async, and the run query async already abstracted away by this storage broker or data broker that you have, right? So the broker already kind of locked that down, right? So it's basically saying I'm generic. I'll return whatever you tell me to return. And then you go and hit and you call that. One problem that you're gonna run, I consider dynamic objects as a primitive, so it's okay. Yeah, you're not gonna have any problems. Not that I think of, not in the foreseeable future.
So we just have run query, accepts query, and then return task of IEnumerable of t, some generic type.
IEnumerable IEnumerable of t or IEnumerable dynamic, either way is fine.
I mean, if it's t, then consumer or foundation service can say, okay, I want table column metadata to return from this query. I expect that.
I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. As long as T can support dynamic. Does it? I don't know. Let's find out.
It does. Yeah,
it does? Okay, yeah. In that case, yeah. In that case, I think we should be good.
At least I think so.
I mean, let's try it, right? Let's do a. Let me open up the entity intelligence project here, and I'm gonna take it over here. I hope you guys know about this C# REPL. I love this program because it basically lets you try things out without having to think too much about adding that. So if you go to if you go to view and then you go to Windows, other Windows, and then there's C# interactive. You can run C# as if it's like a command line. And there are some libraries that do that. Like I can literally say string x equal, Milan, like that. And then I could just say, what's x? And it will print it out for me. It's C#. It's running in REPL mode. So anyway, with that being said, let me clear that. What's your shortcut, by the way? Oh, it doesn't have a shortcut. That really sucks. Okay, so let's try it. So let's say I have void foo that takes t, right? So now, can I call foo with dynamic? It works. Public class something, and then foo. You never trust. You think you know stuff, but C sharp will surprise you. Yeah, it works, man. It'd be good, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that solves that problem. So that means that you will just need something like value task, IEnumerable, because it'll always be IEnumerable of t, and then this will be run query async with t, and you're basically running the query here, and that's your implementation basically.
Oh, about
Oh,
yeah.
mm,
This value task. Why do we have value task instead of task? I mean, in this
mm.
case, I mean conceptually, I think I understand what value task is, but in this case, why?
So value task is basically saying if the value is already present, don't play trickery on the compiler. Value task is actually value or task,
Mm-hmm.
which basically means if value is present, then return value, else run async. Task will always run async, even if the value is present.
Yeah, but
I
in
did.
our context, it always goes async, and it always creates a task because no matter how you're calling it, because we don't have caching or anything, right?
It's very true. You're just gonna have to run. And I did this challenge with some guy. I think he was from Calcutta or something. You know, he said, "Yeah, well, you're always gonna go pull the data." I said, "Okay, let's do a test." And value task still won for some reason. I don't know what it is. It came in 100. It came in 60 nanoseconds less than task, even though we really are going to get the value. Especially if you run it against something like .NET Bench or something like that. There's way too much smarts underneath value task than what I can explain. But that's in general, high level, what it means. Try it. You know, have you heard of .NET Bench, bench.net?
Yeah, benchmarking and
Yeah,
putting.
benchmark. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
try to run it with the same query, hitting the same database. You'll be surprised.
yeah. Interesting. I will definitely.
Do you know what's the thing that breaks my heart the most? Is that the XUnit team, they have the PR merged in to support value task instead of task in the tests, but it's not published yet. And it's really annoying. You know what I mean? Like in here, if I go here and basically run a test, here's a test for you. Watch this. Have you noticed that all our tests are task instead of value task? Have you noticed that part in here? That's all XUnit. XUnit is telling us, I don't understand value task. I'll show you a proof. Here's fact, public, async value task, right? And should be true, async, like that. Okay, and then I'm just gonna, just delay for some time. And I'm just gonna say await like that. Okay, and then I'm gonna go at the bottom here and say assert, right? True is false. Happened to Visual Studio. Too fast for Visual Studio. 64 gigs, man, 64 gigs of RAM, and it's not enough for it. Do you know what my specs are? This is a supercomputer. I should be flying to the moon with this thing, and Visual Studio just barfs, and I'm paying for it. I don't know what else to do here. All right, so let's go back here. So what was I saying? Yeah, so I was saying the assert, right, is true and false, right? So this should fail, right? Like this test should fail because I'm asserting true, false is true. Unless we're writing JavaScript, this should fail, right? It's the little dig for the JavaScript folks, right? Okay, let's run this, right? Control RT right here. Watch what happens. For some reason, it's just not released yet, which is really, really bad. Okay, there we go. And maybe they released it. I don't know. Let's find out. Look, it says passed. Do you see this? So it says this test here should be true async pass. Do you know why? because I did
Well,
value task. If I said task, and I'll tell you a very sad story about this, but if I say task and actually run this again, watch what happens. It waits 10 seconds. I don't know why it chose 10 seconds. Such a waste of life. There you go. See? So I had this really smart guy, right? He spent an entire week, Milan, and he was embarrassed and scared that I'll tell him, you know, what's like, why wouldn't you do like we do? And he wrote all his tests like this, and for the life of him, he had absolutely no idea why these tests. And after a week, he came to me and he said, Hassan, I just want to let you know I won't be able to work with you anymore. And I was like, what's going on? He said, I'm not smart enough. I failed. I say, why did you fail? And he's like, I'm writing tests. The test says it's true, and it is false, and it's passing. and not in a million years, you know, it's pain. It's really bad. Omar says, in this case, foundation may also be a pass-through as well. Higher business may be needed to pass a final query. Maybe, you know, I mean, either way, I think it's okay for the foundation service to pre-bake because it's within the testing, you know, framework. But we can discuss this later. So anyway, yeah, man. So this is the problem, right? And I tried to upgrade, you know, XUnit. The code is merged. It's open source project. The code is merged. It should know what value task is and deal with it. But the problem here is that in its head, it thinks, oh, the value is present with the, by default, the value is present as that this is passed. So don't wait for anything else. It's so stupid. It's a disaster. It's really bad. Okay, so you get the idea, right? You know, we need two methods at the foundation service layer, but at the broker layer, you're basically saying run query async, and we're done. The beauty of this is that you're no longer dependent on Dapper. Like your foundation service doesn't even know what Dapper is anymore.
mhm.
Maybe slightly based on the exceptions that are going to be thrown, but as you go forward to processing services and stuff like that, it's gone. There's no Dapper anymore. It's actually your core business logic, right? If you build a completely massive complex enterprise system according to the standard, throw away all your foundation services, keep their contracts, keep their interfaces, but throw all the concrete classes of your foundation services and your brokers and throw away all your exposure layers. Whatever sits in between these two, that's where the magic is. And this is why I always tell people, don't put too much smarts into your foundation services. They're supposed to be dumb. They're supposed to add a validation layer and abstract away. That's the responsibility, truly single responsibility. It's categorical responsibility, right? So when you talk to people about responsibility, they tell them, oh, something takes care of students and something takes care of teachers. But there's three kinds of responsibility, and one of it is categorical, meaning I'm responsible about abstraction. Something else says I'm responsible about higher order business logic. Something else will say I'm responsible about orchestration. It's much deeper and more than anything. Okay, so Milan, are you clear? This is the plan.
Yeah.
Okay, get us going because we're almost done. Like a couple of sessions, we're gonna be handling exceptions and doing some validations, and then we'll call it. The project is done, really, and then we go build a desktop application for SQL or something. Okay, let's go back to Kailu and Omar. Guys, you know, we were supposed to kind of refactor things. Someone criticized me for the other day. I think it was Monk or someone. You know, they said, Hassan, well, how could you possibly write a code that is so bad, you know, in terms of readability for the AI processing service? You know, they were talking about the natural query. Let me pull latest here. Yeah, they were talking about the joining that we're doing in here, right? So Kailu and Kailu and Omar, what did you guys come up with? Did you figure it out? How we can make this a little bit cleaner? No?
I worked on some validation work. I haven't actually, I didn't do refactoring.
I
Oh, the
basically
valid,
just break it down to smaller methods.
just breaking it down to smaller methods. Yeah, I mean, there's probably a better way to do this. But okay, Omar, does this validation code here have tests for it?
It has one failing test like I created.
Okay. So if
So
I
actually,
run,
it's interesting because the structure of the data we pass to validation is like a list of things. Plus,
Yep.
I want to kind of see what your opinion is for what I did.
Yeah, we have to validate them one by one, basically. So
yeah, so that's what I did. But like, we'll take a look at the member data here, and because kind of okay, we are passing a table. I put a case where the table names are empty, or the table names are null, or the columns are empty and the columns are null, right? I put all these cases. I don't know if I'm going overkilling it or because this is covering everything, right?
let's see. So you did the case. Let's see. So in here, you basically did the theory, and you basically went and said, "Give me all the cases."
So yeah, as you can see, like there is all the cases for the table and columns, and this is
This one
kind of
here.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, passing it to that single test. Maybe there is an easier way, but
So yeah, so there is here if table information is empty, and there
table
is if
names and then, yeah, go ahead.
are null or an actual key. Why don't we break it into different tests? Like, should throw a validation exception if table name is null, empty, or white space. Like this actual, you still write the rules, but you evaluate one model at a time. You know what I mean? Like there is this thing that Elbic came up with during our OpenAI sessions where he said there is a hybrid between non-circuit breaking validations and circuit breaking validation. He said if you're working with nested models, then you need to have two non-circuit breaking validations, and if the top one fails, like combined together, they are circuit breaking, right? What I mean by that is that we would basically go and do something like this, Omar. So let me show you.
Two
If I go,
validates.
to validate, to
I
validate
thought about
methods.
that. Yeah, I saw it in the standard book
Yep.
already.
Yep.
But because it's kind of a list of tables, like I said,
Yep.
okay, should I put the validate in a loop to go nesting? Maybe.
I mean, I don't know, Kailu, what did we do in the past with lists? We validated them one by one, right? Trying to remember what. Okay, at least we agree first on the part where you basically validate just at the top level the table name, right? So this is, you basically go and say is invalid, and this is table name. And you also go and say is invalid table columns. We agree on that part. So this is one part. And then you go inside that guy, which is validate, and you go and check is invalid for every value in that column. So table, column, name, and also is invalid table, column, value, right? So that's the second one. Now the problem is there's many of these, right?
Yeah.
So does it make sense to aggregate or to break if one of them is break if one of them is broken? So you basically go and do for each, and then table column in table dot columns, and you basically iterate.
Okay, but we have actually the tables themselves are in a list as well, right? So even the first validate is in a list. So the way I'm thinking about it, like we want one exception with all the errors, right?
That's
But in
right.
this case, we will have more than one exception.
No, you're right. You're right. So how do we solve?
Can you take a look at what I did, and let's maybe start from there and give me feedback on it so that I can improve it.
Let's see. So in here, you basically, let's see. So in your validation, you basically said, I expect AI processing validation exception, and you're passing all these permutations. Okay,
Yeah.
now what does your logic in here looks like?
So
Validate.
yeah, there's a circuit breaker, the first one, which is if tables are null, we just break, and otherwise we go validate the natural query, the tables, and the columns all at once. So my validation rule actually does some link to validate all of them at once.
Okay, so hang on. So you're basically checking the tables, and then you're checking, well, this doesn't make sense. Do you know why? Because if this guy is null, you won't be able to access these.
But if it's null, I break on line 18, right?
Then why are you checking twice? What does this do?
Yeah, so one for the tables and then one for the columns. I didn't want to put them in one exception or like one message for the rule because they're actually different in terms of, okay, your columns are empty or null versus your tables are invalid or null or empty, right? That's why I separated them into two validation rules.
So what does is invalid tables do? You basically the condition is if table information string name or columns equal null, or table information dot columns count equal 0, then it freaks out. But you're validating that, so you consider the table as invalid if the number of columns are less than 1, which is fair, or the name is null or empty or white space. And if any of these tables have that problem, then you basically mark them as invalid. Okay. Okay, that's great. But if columns, you go in here, so okay, in here you basically say, but what if one of the tables are null?
One of the tables, yeah, it's handled. It is invalid tables. It says if, oh, actually, yeah, it needs to be here if the table itself is null or these things.
Yeah, like
right. Yeah.
Right, so let me just kind of validate my assumption. List of tables, right? And you're basically going and saying list like that. And inside of this, there's a table information. You can literally just go and say, okay, here's a list. It's great, but it's just a bunch of nulls forever. There, it's a good statement. It works, right?
Yeah.
So something else needs to happen. It's like like I thought before, like going back to what Elbic was doing. This is a very tough one because there's multiple layers in here that you need to kind of unwrap and validate. There is also multiple layers of, they're kind of nested in an interesting way. So let's just, if we think about this just out loud, like first of all, break if a table information list is null, right? So you basically, you decide that this is a broken deal. You're not going to move forward with it. You'll also break if natural query is null, empty, or white space. Is that fair? You break the circuit, right? Okay, so that's one. And then the next iteration of this, okay, if the list is not, then we need to go here and say break if any of list table information is null. You break. You opt out immediately. And I might be wrong here for a second, but let's just see. And then validate if table information dot table name is null, empty, or white space. Validate, these are not breaking. You know, if table information dot column, column name.
No, actually, it's name for the table, right? Then columns.
Oh yeah, that's right. So table name, yeah, table name, and then columns is null, like that, or empty. That's right. Because you can't actually create a SQL table that doesn't have at least one column in it. That's true. And then you break.
And then I break.
Yeah, like this is a non-circuit breaker that when it reaches to the bottom of the things that it's trying to validate, it breaks. Right?
Okay, so
then break.
Then basically means not line 43 and 44. They need to be in the same validate function.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
I
exactly.
Okay.
So you pass that, like if table information dot table name is null, empty, or white space, table information columns. So in here, if any, basically.
Yeah. Then a third level for the columns themselves.
Now the third level is going to be the actual column. So you're basically going to say validate column name is not null, empty, or white space. Validate if any column name, if any column value is not null, empty, or white space.
Yeah, we call them types, or type. Yeah.
And then break.
Yeah, that's good feedback. I'll
I'm not. Your error will be like something like one or more columns are invalid. One or more tables are invalid. One or more. Like when you're logging the error, like I see here, each table should have, right? You're supposed to tell them the problem is, like, what's the problem, right? So I would say something like one or more tables are invalid, right? Or are null. Something like that.
Yeah.
What do you think, Kay? Does this sound fair for validation?
I think this is so far so good.
So far, so good.
But
okay.
Your error message has to be more specific. Otherwise,
That's right.
It's hard to track these things.
That's right. I agree. Yeah, this is how I would validate it, Omar. I'll just send this to you it's in the recording, so feel free to kind of watch the recording. But ideally, we just want to write the test for it. Let's try to write the test for this. This is going to be multiple tests, Omar. So this is 1 test, 2, 3, 4, 5 different tests just to do these validations. You can't lump them all together. It becomes very hard to maintain.
But isn't it, we will be actually throwing one type of exception here, which is what the validate throws?
So in here, you can throw an exception is null table information list exception.
Okay, yes, correct. In the circuit breaker, we can have special exceptions.
Yep, or invalid natural query exception. These are circuit breakers. They're basically saying, no, this is broken, right? In here, this is invalid AI invalid AI processing exception. And that's when you go and say inside of it, one or more, right? You get the idea, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah,
that's
yeah.
not, and then in here, you're gonna do the invalid with the report, like with the data having the issues. I'm okay with that. And the same thing in here. So we're throwing three different kinds of exceptions.
Yeah, makes sense.
Really, I want for like by Monday, just give me one of these tests or two if you can. And then Kylo and I will ping pong with you back and forth.
Okay.
Take it slow and try to just understand it. I don't care if we take 2 or 4 or 5 or 20 sessions. I mean, how many sessions the OpenAI one took, Kylo? 37 or something like that. I think the OpenAI took a lot of sessions. A lot.
Lasts for 2-3 months.
Yeah, it lasted for 2-3 months, right? I think it was like I think it took 36 sessions. 36 sessions, each one of them between an hour, 2 hours. Some of them took 3 hours. So I don't care. It needs to take some time, and this is a stream. It's not I'm not showing a thing. I'm basically saying let's go and solve a problem together. So Omar, it's up to you. I mean, these three are easy. Honestly, all of them are easy. So it's up to you if you want to write the tests individually this way.
Yeah,
But
I'll do it.
okay. Just the test though. You don't have to write the implementation, so we can kind of go back and forth and show people this stuff and all that. You know what I mean? All right, we're at the top of the hour, friends. Milan, thank you for joining us. If we usually don't do sessions on Fridays, which is your Saturday. What time is it over there for you? Is it like early morning, I'm thinking, or maybe in the afternoon?
It's 1 in the afternoon.
1 in the afternoon.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So
Saturday.
you are in Malaysia, right? Right now, right?
In Singapore.
Singapore. That's right. So yeah, I mean, if we have a Friday session, hop in, man. Just come talk to us. Otherwise, feel free to kind of stream.
Tomorrow
take
I
the.
can jump in as well if that makes
That's
sense.
right.
Mhm.
That's right. That's right. Yeah. Anyway, thank you all for joining us today. We didn't write quite a bit, but we discussed a couple of topics about how we design and take the direction with things. And I'll sync up with all of you on Monday. Thank you all. Take care.
Thank you.